Okay. All right. So, I have up here, first of all, are a few reminders. So I should have your syllabus acknowledgement sheet. That's this half sheet with the book condition report. Some people, there's a little stack here, didn't have the half sheet, didn't have it signed. A lot of people said they're bringing it today. So if that's the case, you could do it after class. Just drop it off up here. And then you should have checked out a book yesterday. You have your first reading from the textbook. Reading 1 is due on Friday, and then the next reading is due the following Monday. So we're kind of off for this chapter on personality. So the twins makeup. I have a few people who are absent when we had our graded discussion on twins. The makeup is on It's Learning, on my Nature Nurture page, and then also my epigenetics video. I reposted that if people were looking for that and couldn't find it. And then the reading 1, sorry about that. Reading 1's wrong. Okay, so going back, what we're going to talk about today are some early theories in psychology, a little bit of an overview. If you looked at your unit guide, you see that there is this, it's like 3 units. It's Nature Nurture, Intro and History of Psychology, and Personality unit. But of the first 2, I'm not having you read anything in the textbook. I've kind of pointed out the highlights, pointed out some key vocabulary that I think, especially for that Nature Nurture, that you were probably already knew. And the Intro and History chapter, I stopped spending so much time going through that because that chapter is recovered throughout the year. So we kind of cover it as we're just doing the year. Okay, so it talks about here's the key people in psychology and the key approaches, but as we talk through the units, you will get kind of all of that to that way. So we'll be talking about a few of the older theories, just a couple of them that I don't hit on otherwise later in the year, and then really start talking about what does modern psychology look at, how do they look at personality, and then the psychodynamic perspectives is what we're going to start. So the first psychologist, the first psychology experimenter was Wilhelm Wundt. In 1879, the University of Leipzig, he did this reaction time experiment. So the experiment was basically this little contraption that held a ball, and then the ball was dropped onto a person's hand, and then how closely would the person move their hand. So basically, how long does it take for neural impulse to get from the hand to the brain, and then for you to move your hand out of the way. Okay, so reaction time was his experiment. So this is a very early experiment and considered the first psychological experiment. And we are going to look next at, why. The other reason he's important is that he educated people who are going to advance the field. So one of his students was a man by the name of Edward Titchener. So Edward Titchener is going to take psychology forward with his idea of trying to map cognition or map thinking, map mental processes. So he thought, if we use something, he called it introspection, meaning I'm going to hand you a rose, and I want you just to, whatever you think of, however you're describing it, whatever things are coming to mind, that you tell us. And so the only way you know what's on someone's mind is if they tell you, right? So he said if someone just is introspective, they're just thinking, but they're telling us aloud what they're thinking, then we can map the structure of the mind or map thoughts. Now, why is this difficult? What is a hang-up that you're seeing, that you can see about just saying we can map thoughts by just having people tell us what they think? Yes. Yeah, sometimes people don't always want to say what they think. They could be holding something back. You have no way of knowing, right? So you kind of have to just trust that they're really telling you what they think. And some people are very verbal. They can come up with lots of, descriptors or way to describe things, and some people aren't as verbal. So that also could be an issue. So obviously this isn't perfect, right? How could we compare this person to person? But it's the first attempt to really try to look at the mind, which is something new. This is Edward Titchener's brain. He donated it to science, and I believe that this jar of his brain is at Cornell. So if you want to visit his brain, you could maybe do that. Okay, so William James is a student of Titchener. He's a student of Lund. And he's going to talk about functionalism. Now, functionalism is really influenced by evolution, what we talked about Tuesday. So what he's going to say is, okay, maybe we can't tell everything that a person's thinking, but instead, let's look at the different mental processes that we all have, or the different behaviors that we see just out with humans, and then try and figure out how they've helped us adapt, survive, flourish. So how is it evolutionary? How has it been part of natural selection? That these are the behaviors that have lasted, or these are the mental processes that we must have because we've needed them over time. Okay, so you can really see the evolutionary influence there. Now, people commonly mix up structuralism and functionalism. So when you just look at what it's called, structuralism is mapping the structure of the mind, the structure of thinking. Functionalism is looking at processes and how did they function to help us survive over time. So that's kind of how you can distinguish them. All right, so when we're talking about personality, personality is the study of individuals and how they've developed their characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. Okay, so when we look at that each individual is different, unique, has some combination of traits, qualities, when we look at that, where did that come from? And we say characteristic because I'm a very optimistic person. Occasionally I'll feel pessimistic or I'll feel down about something, but I mostly will go back or gravitate towards like a short little visit, but then I gravitate back to being an optimistic person. So, characteristic is what's typical. So early theories here. Early attempts to try to understand personality. So there was a idea of phrenology at one time where we could study personality by looking at the shape of a person's head. So you can see these drawings here on the right. Or by measuring the bumps. So you could actually go and maybe go feel someone's head and I feel this, or you must be very outgoing, here's your ridge of humor, and so they would just feel someone's head and thought that could tell them something about personality. Now, I think you can see there that too, right? Think about how complicated personality is and how many different qualities there would be. Like, how could you really tell that just by feeling someone's head? That would be pretty difficult. But that was an early theory. There was also a theory that they call somatotypes, and just saying that certain personalities came with specific body types. So if you are tall and skinny, then you have all of these qualities. If you are overweight, then you have those qualities. Mesomorph is in between. Okay, so first of all, there's only 3 body types. What if you're like short and thin and not tall and thin? What if so I don't know. So there's, first of all, only 3 body types. People come in all shapes and sizes. And then the other thing is that I don't think we can say that every single person with a similar shaped body has the exact same personality, right? So obviously this doesn't seem very legitimate either. So we're going to go now into our modern theories. And so when we look at our modern theories, so we have 150 years of psychology. So psychology has been developing, and as it's developed, and people have been raised in different time periods, as they build on each other's knowledge, as they've learned, know more, have better testing, and have learned more, new theories come out, new theories evolve, things change. Okay, so the important point here, I guess, is the third point, that psychologists have developed different ways to evaluate an individual, right? And they call these different ways perspectives. Okay, different perspectives to explain individuals and their behavior. So we talked about evolutionary psychology. That is a perspective, where someone would look at a person and they'd say, look at this person, here's all about them, and they would explain everything that they're doing and the person that they are because through evolutionary viewpoint. This helped them survive, this helps them find a mate, and so forth. Okay, so depending on the theory, okay, they may have different explanations. And so that's when we get to the next big thing I kind of want to emphasize before we start going through our modern theories, is that there's multiple perspectives on how to understand an individual's personality. And then think of these perspectives as a lens. Okay, so we're going to talk about Freud first and the psychodynamic perspective. So think of that as a lens. If you were only using Freud and his ideas to analyze a person, what would he say? What would they say about this person? But then Freud is around the 1800s. New people are going to follow, are going to build off his work, are going to add to his work, or find out new things. And then they'll say, oh no, this, not Freud, this is the way, this is the lens you want to look at through. And so forth. Okay? Now, right here, in the modern era, psychologists understand that behaviors have multiple causes, that personalities come from multiple different things. Okay, so each of the perspectives that we talk about has strengths, but they also have weaknesses. And this is for every single one of them. So the only way we can account for the weaknesses is to really kind of take it all as one big picture. However, when psychology was developing over the past 150 years, they weren't doing that at first. Okay, they were just kind of taking one, taking the next, taking the next. Okay, so the theories or the schools of thought in psychology, I put a little line because biological we will be talking about later this semester. It has to do with the brain and hormones, genetics. So we touched on it a little bit with that nature side, or nature versus nurture, but we still have more to do there. Evolutionary, we talked about the other day, Tuesday. That's a lens. Behaviorism, we'll be talking about much later in the year. That's another lens through which psychology can be viewed, or a person's actions or personality can be viewed. The four in the bottom, psychodynamic, humanistic, cognitive, social, cultural, right, are for our units, purposes for this unit, the ones that we will be covering. Okay. All right, so let's get into our discussion of modern personality and our psychologist Sigmund Freud. Now, how many of you have heard of Freud for this? Okay, yeah, he's a popular dude, right? People really know about him. He's like cultural, right? So that's one reason there's so much on him. And if you looked at your book and the different theories, there's the most information on his theory, even though his theory is the most outdated of all the theories. But he's still focused upon, because he was the first, so the first comprehensive theory of personality. He was the first one to really sit down with patients and talk to them and, get a feel for who they were, and then use that to develop, a theory. So he really and then to try to come up with a way to help people. So he's the first to do all of those things. And some of his stuff has been, ruled to be inaccurate and not to be the case or not provable. But some of his things have proven, to maybe have some truth and be accurate. So there's some things that kind of remain over time as well, even though some of what he talked about has proven to be not true or to not work. So let's talk about Freud a little bit. So Freud, University of Vienna, becoming a doctor in 1873. Okay, so this is during the Victorian era. And as he started seeing patients, he started seeing all of these patients, particularly female patients, where the patients had problems but with no physical cause. And I mean, when you read some of these case studies, it's stuff like, I can't move the left side of my body, or I'm sick all of the time, or, some people who are paralyzed, people who literally can't speak, who sicknesses, extreme headaches, dizziness. He kind of called these, or they called them at the time, nervous complaints, nervous disorders is what they would kind of call it, and that became his specialty. Especially when he discovered that a lot of these, especially, these women, had nothing physically wrong with them. They didn't have a stroke, there's nothing wrong with their brain, so they haven't had an accident, so why can't this person move, right? So there's only specific things that will cause the left side of your body to be immobile, and this person doesn't have any of those things. And as he started seeing more and more patients like this, he started to realize that, or hypothesize, that maybe their problems were all in the mind. And it had something that he could do working with the mind to help them. Okay, so the couch thing, right, there's his couch in that picture there. So he started trying to develop ways to treat people with these disorders. Okay, and this had never been dealt with before. Now I have Victorian era in stars on either side, because this era is particularly, well, when you look at this picture of the dress, this is a dress from the time, what do you notice about it? It goes all the way down to the floor, and all the way up to the neck, all the way down to the sleeves, of courses, so there's definitely feminine shape, but all the skin basically is covered, and females would also be wearing like a glove. Okay, so, showing your wrists, ladies, showing those ankles, right, that's scandalous business, that's streetwalker stuff. Okay, so you don't have that stuff, then a man might catch a glimpse of that wrist and have improper thoughts. Okay, so all right, what's the frenzy about wrists? Okay, so this is the time period, and then in gloves, like no skin to skin contact, like would be appropriate unless you're like married. Okay, so if you're somewhere and this guy maybe is going to, take your hand and lead you into a room or help you up into a carriage, right? You better be having a glove on, both of you, right? Skin to skin contact, and that's like third base stuff. Like, don't. So I'm telling you this. All right, because a lot of his theories are going to revolve around being inhibited, being repressed, okay? And for the time, he's very influenced by what society is like at the time. So keep that in mind as we go through this theory. Okay, so the first part of what you need to know is that Freud says the mind is like an iceberg, mostly hidden. So he's talking about that a lot of what you have going on in your mind you are unaware of. If you look at this picture up here, you can see my large iceberg, and there's a nice little iceberg here above the water, but when you look below the surface, right, that's huge and it's much bigger than what's above. So your conscious mind, Freud said, is what you are actively aware of. Okay, anything that's going through your mind right now, if you're still thinking about risks, okay, then that's in your conscious awareness. If you are thinking about, you're thinking about hopefully what I'm saying, right, and what this means, and maybe you read some sections of this in the book, so you're kind of thinking about what you read and wrote down, and maybe you're thinking about what you have to do next, or your mind's wandered to practice after school, and you're a little worried about what you're going to have to do, or whatever, or your game, whatever that is. Okay, so all of this is active awareness, right, active processing. Okay, so the unconscious, this much larger area, is all what you're unaware of, below the surface stuff. Any thoughts, feelings, wishes, memories, experiences that you have buried down there because they're unacceptable, inappropriate, or perhaps traumatizing. They're too difficult for your mind to process, they're damaging, and so therefore they get buried. Okay, so Freud believed that you have a huge amount of stuff. Now maybe you're thinking, hey, like, my childhood's been pretty good here. Like, there's not very much that I could think that I could have buried down here, but Freud said everyone has stuff. Everyone. Okay, so that's what's in your unconscious. And now, the unconscious is a very difficult thing. Can you tell me what's in your unconscious? No. Can you just access it whenever you want? No. Can we prove that it's there? No. Can we prove it's not there? No. Okay, so this is one thing that makes his theory difficult, okay? All right, next part. He said that every human being is governed by two basic drives. Now think about that. Every human being is essentially an animal. He is influenced by Darwin. His work is coming out right as Darwin's work is coming out. So he's going to say that the first thing that drives us as animals is sex drive, eros. Okay, he also called this libido. Libido, libido. So he said that a lot of what you do, say, the things that you want out of life, your actions, is all based around making yourself attractive to someone so that you can find a mate and make sure the species survives. Okay, so he said this is the main driving force. Now remember, think back to what I was just saying about Victorian era, right, and kind of the repressed time, so that may be why he feels this way, but this is his theory. The other main driving force is thanatos. He called it thanatos. So you basically have this, eros, libido side, and then this thanatos side also. And this is your death drive, your aggression drive. That you have to be aggressive to get what you need to survive, to ensure that you survive. And that ultimately you are going to die. YOLO, right? You know that. And so because you know that, right, that there's this unconscious desire to complete your life cycle. How many of you like roller coasters? How many of you like horror movies? How many of you like haunted houses? Who in here wants to jump out of an airplane? You want to fly up into a plane thousands of feet in the air and jump out with a parachute. How many want to bungee jump? You want to stand on a bridge with a rope strapped to your leg. Who knows? It could break. Who tied these knots? and you're going to jump off the bridge. Why do we want adrenaline? Why do we want to feel like, oh, I could die, but I'm not going to. That was so awesome. Okay, Freud said that's Thanatos. So, we are basically animals, according to Freud, but also, we're not animals. Our society is very complex. Dogs aren't like, oh man, where should I sit? What people, do I know anyone? I don't want to walk in after everyone else. And man, what should I wear today? What look do I want, right, to convey, right? We're not animals. Our society has a ton of rules, right? You can't just act like your pet dog, right? Whenever you want. You say that's sad. All right, so that means, according to Freud, that you are constantly inhibited. You maybe right now just want to be like, man, I'm done for the day. I'm going to just leave and go home and take a 12-hour nap. Okay? But you can't. There's consequences. Well, you could, but there's consequences, right? And you know that. So you're constantly, according to Freud, inhibited, restrained from following your animal instincts, your eros and your thanatos. And that you live in a state of constant inner conflict. And this is going to come up a lot. Constant inner conflict between your drives and society. And that's where we're going to go next. So let's look more at this. So personality, he said, this is his quote, arises from a conflict between your aggressive, pleasure-seeking impulses and society's restraints on you. So, when you're born, you are born straight up id. Okay? Straight up. Now, if you look at this really adorable little baby right here. Okay, so I think I mentioned in one of my large groups that I took pictures of my daughter, like 10 of them, eating spaghetti, and I couldn't decide which was the cutest. So here's 4 highlights for you. Okay, so I chose them. This totally ties in, not just so that we can all look at my cute baby during the middle of the day, but because she is pure id. She eats and she's just like all over her face and on the hair, and she throws it on the floor to the dog, right? And when I let her out, she climbs on the table now. She's climbing on our coffee table all the time. She gotten a couple notes from her doing a little fighting at daycare. Okay, now you can't be like, oh, that person has really cool shoes. I'm just going to go bite their face. Right? Like themselves. Okay, so that's what babies are pure. She doesn't care that I'm tired. Hold me now. Feed me now. Right? And that's how little kids are. Okay, so your id is you're born pure id. You're going to cry because you're hungry, cry because you're cold. You need to be taken care of all the time. And as you're older, you learn. My son, he's like, I'm hungry right now. I want a snack. My dinner's ready in a couple minutes. You have to wait. Caveman would just go and tear the pantry apart, right? He could try, but he'll have consequences, and we'll get to that. Okay, so pleasure principle is what it is all about. How can I avoid pain and have the most gratification possible? If you want to just pull your mom's hair, let her rip. It's another favorite thing to do. Jewelry, hair, right? She doesn't care. She kind of sounds mean, doesn't she? She's sweet. But that's how kids are, right? So now what do we do about it? Do your parents just let you run around and do whatever you want and just be a caveman or a cave woman, cave girl? No. Well, maybe some people a little bit. I don't know. What they do is they restrain you. So here's my next story. So here's my son. I couldn't leave him out. This is him at Bay Beach. How many of you have been to Bay Beach? How many of you have ridden these cars? One person remembers driving. Okay, so now there's a really crappy thing about going on rides. You have to pay. You have to stand in line, wait your turn, and then when you finally get to ride it, this is the first time he's ever been on a ride. What happens? The ride, no, it didn't break down, but eventually it ends. And when it ends, what do you have to do? Get out. Why? Because there's more kids waiting in line, and your ticket was for one ride. Okay, explain that to a 2-year-old who's never been on a ride before, right? So, wait, hold on, sorry. I'll get there. Here he is bawling. He was kicking too. My husband slowed him down. Okay, so now actually I have to give him credit because there was only one sobbing, and then he understood and he followed the rules from then on. But that's a great example of superego. Okay, so superego is brought to you by your parents, by your grandparents, by church, by school, by authority, by society. By age 5, this is finalized, but your parents don't just let you run around as little cave people, or later in life you're going to really struggle because society has rules. If you just, as an adult, were like at the fair and you just rode the whatever pirate ship, welcome to the fair, okay, the pirate ship, and you're like, oh no, I'm just going to stay on here. No, I'm not getting hot. You try to freak out, they're just, oh, we'll let you stay on. Okay, sir. No, they'll probably come arrest you, throw you in fair jail. Okay, so superego is all about being perfect, right? Superego is your conscience. Superego is that the thing you know, I should be doing this. These are the rules. So let's talk ego. Ego is reality. Ego sometimes negotiates between the id and the environment, or mediates between the superego and the id. So let me give you an example. Okay, you're finishing this class. Let's say you have another class right after this, and all of your friends come up and they say, hey, we're all going to Bricks. You want to go? But you have a class. How many of you are thinking straight up, you probably skip and go? One person, okay? How many of you are thinking, there's no way I would go because I couldn't, that's just not my jam, I'm skipping classes. Okay, how many of you are thinking, oh, well, depends on class. Okay, so, this is what you would do in these situations is your ego. This is your personality. I personally, speaking for myself, I have always been a total rule follower. If Mr. Steckbauer called right now and said, I want to see you in my office, I would probably almost start crying on the way down there because I'd be so nervous. I have nothing to be nervous for, but I hate, am I going to get in trouble? Oh my gosh. Right? So I'm very super ego driven. That's my personality. Okay? There are people who are very id driven. I don't care. See what happens. Oh, I'm in court. Oh, I went to jail. Okay. And that's their personality. So some of you in here, and I have people last class too, are like, straight up, I'd skip class. I'm not going to miss time with my friends at Bricks. Okay, and so they're a little bit more id, and then some people a little bit more superego. Sometimes you find a balance. Okay, so it's incorrect to say that the ego is always trying to find a compromise. Sometimes you